Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's a special edition of the Monday show on a Wednesday following Newcastle United's 1-1 draw with PSG in the Champions League. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined by our Newcastle United editor Aaron Stokes. And we should be here talking about a famous win. We should be here talking about the bravery in which United defended. We should be talking about Alexander Isak's first Champions League goal. We should be talking about Lewis Miley dominating on the biggest stage. We should be talking about Tino Livramento and Anthony Gordon. And we should be talking about Newcastle United heading into the final round of the Champions League game with their destiny in their own hands. Instead, we're talking about VAR. We're talking about how it's cost these players a place in history, how it's cost the fan base a memory of a famous win on a famous night, and how VAR is an utter shambles. Livramento, the man adjudged to have handled the ball in the 7th minute of 8 added on, despite every man and his dog seeing that it hit his chest first before hitting his elbow at a short distance. Referee Simon Magnet awarded it, and after being called to the pitch side monitor, VAR was brought in to stop this nonsense, to remove the glaring errors, but it seems every weekend we are here talking about VAR has failed. It's often not a mistake. It's so-called experienced officials failing to apply the laws of the game properly. It's not a mistake, it's ineptitude. The Champions League is meant to be the best competition in the world. We were told that the officiating is better than the Premier League and that they use VAR properly. It doesn't seem like it. Where does that leave us? 6 years on since it was introduced, are we really any better off? It seems to me, for every right decision, there are 2 or 3 errors that are much more costly. Do we scrap it at this point until it improves? There's an argument to say we do. Quite frankly, VAR is failing and it isn't good enough. Aaron, can you tell I'm a little bit angry?
Just a little bit, yeah. I can sort of sense that.
Can you see in any world how that is a penalty?
No, let's be completely frank, I can't. As you mentioned there, the biggest footballing club competition in the world, and somehow, they're getting a mistake that literally I have not seen one person, apart from maybe a few petty, spiteful Arsenal fans saying that they thought it was a penalty. I just still can't get my head around it really 12 hours on.
So why has the referee, who was meant to be the best in the game and actually had a decent game up until that point, why is he giving it? Has he crumbled?
Well, there's a little bit of talk this morning that he wasn't actually shown the angle that we've all seen behind the goal of the ball hitting Livramento's chest from sort of face on. Apparently, he has potentially only seen a couple of angles from different spots where it probably wasn't too clear. There's been a lot of talk, obviously, saying that he did crumble under the pressure. PSG's players were obviously around him. He's obviously in a very, very hostile stadium with a lot of home fans who would have been, urging him to give that decision. I don't know, as you say, a referee who's meant to be the best in the world. He's refereed Champions League finals, World Cup finals, with a team of VAR officials who have been there every step of the way with him. And for whatever reason, they've both got it wrong last night, and Newcastle have paid the price.
He didn't seem to look at it for too long, did he? It was very quick, and if that is the case, he wasn't showing the replays. You would assume that those replays of the different angles I didn't see would be coming at some point down the line. He goes over, and it is literally a matter of seconds before he points to his elbow and says that's where it's hit him, so it's a handball. Surely he's just gone too quickly, right?
Potentially, yeah, and especially if he hasn't seen the angle that we've all seen, which makes it clear that it's obviously off the body first. That's probably the only thing you could really say about it.
And let's be clear, he seemed to handle the pressure up until that point really well. PSG were adamant they should have had a penalty against Gordon, but that the ref wasn't interested. And the other interesting thing is that I've just been told by a fan who was over at the game that PSG have a microphone that a fan has control of during the game, and the mic plays out across the loudspeaker at the stadium. So when Newcastle United fans started singing, this fan would boo, and that drowns them out. That obviously then gets the PSG fans going. And also, when the referee goes over to the monitor, the fan is booing, and that's putting extra pressure on the referee. Look, we don't know if it does influence or not, but surely this mic thing, that can't be allowed.
If I'm completely honest, I didn't really know about the mic. I certainly couldn't hear it on the TV from where I was watching. As for the referee, I think he got some big calls right last night. He didn't give a penalty on Hakimi in the first half, which I think Ali McCoy's got that spot on. I think if that had been awarded a penalty, I don't think VAR would have overturned it. The Lewis Miley one is arguably more of a penalty than the Livramento one, and that wasn't given, rightly so. I thought every single decision up until the 95th minute, the referee got spot on, rock solid in the face of pretty sustained PSG pressure from the players and the fans, which just makes the decision to give the penalty so later on even more baffling and even more heartbreaking, really.
He let the game flow, didn't he? It was a really good spectacle, especially the first half. But what is the remedy with this then? Because it's not just about VAR, is it? It's about the handball rule as well. We saw back in April the UEFA Football Board met and they urged clarity from UEFA on the handball rule, and they said, or they recommended to UEFA that no handball offence should be called on a player if the ball is previously deflected from his own body, and in particular when the ball does not go toward the goal. Now, we understand that those recommendations weren't put into place, but surely common sense has to apply. And, Livramento, the distance between his arm and his chest, it was next to nothing. It's just baffling. But do we need to change the rules of the game where, and people know who listen to this podcast, that this is my theory, that if it hits your hand in the box and it's not a deliberate attempt by the offensive player to win a handball in the box, it should be a penalty, regardless if it's come off your chest, regardless if it's deflected onto you, because that then removes all elements of doubt. Or do we change the rules some other way where this just doesn't happen?
I think, as you say, this was UEFA's football and board that suggested it. It's not as if it's FIFA or an outside governing body suggesting this to UEFA. It's their own governing body who said these rules should be implemented from the start of the 23-24 season. They haven't been rejected. Apparently, they obviously clearly haven't been implemented. God knows why, but it's obviously put a lot more spotlight on it. Look, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think VAR is the problem, and I know you just did that big monologue there where you've said it is, but I don't think it is, because really, just look at the absolute ineptitude of these referees in the Premier League, and you're actually going to take the technology away from them. It would make things 10 times worse. But saying that, there does need to be some sort of fix, and I don't know what that is. I don't know whether it's getting ex-pros involved or just pumping significantly more funds into the training of referees. But that's what makes last night even more frustrating, is the fact that in the Premier League that wouldn't have been given as a penalty, and we've had a lot of ex-refs, all English, coming out today and agreeing with that. Mark Clattenburg, Dermot Gallagher have both said in no way, shape or form is that a penalty, especially not in the Premier League. Biggest competition in world football, and you're getting a result, and you're getting a decision like that at such a crucial time. I don't know what the answer is.
Kiri Sandavid Rayang, who's watching on YouTube, says the problem here isn't VAR itself, but the lack of consistency on the handball rule. And look, I know I did do that big monologue. I think the issue is that whether it's in the Premier League or in the Champions League, there doesn't seem to be a solution to this. The technology itself is not the issue. It is the people using it. But until someone comes up with an idea and makes a big call on who was actually behind the screens, we're going to continue to get these glaring errors, which are costing football teams. And it's not just Newcastle United. We saw Wolves versus Fulham on Monday. I mean, Gary O'Neill, quite right in everything he said. It's his reputation on his line. It's livelihoods on the line. And week after week, we're seeing these people using this magnificent bit of technology incorrectly. And I just think maybe you scrap it until people can learn to use it properly.
No, I can't agree with that at all. You're telling me that you want to take this technology out of the Premier League and leave your on-field decisions to the people that are getting it wrong in the first place.
But then
the standard of refereeing in the Premier League is not good enough by any stretch of the imagination to take away VAR. They get too many decisions wrong with VAR, never mind without it. So you're telling me that VAR gets scrapped, and when Anthony Gordon gets fouled clear as day in the box and it's not given, you'd be screaming for it back. It's not the technology that's the problem. They need to just get a grasp of how to use it better.
Yeah, but we seem to be having this conversation every week, every month, where we say that people who are using it are not using it correctly. We are years into this. How much longer can we go on with the ineptitude of those behind the screen influencing the referee's decisions?
Well, this is why the argument for me is that you need to, there needs to be either better training, there needs to be ex-pros involved, there needs to be something to make the technology work properly. It works in almost every league, and it usually works in the Champions League, apart from a couple of occasions this season. It just doesn't work in the Premier League. So I just can't get behind the fact of taking it out. I mean, it would cause more problems taking it out, because you would have offsides and penalty decisions going against you more so than,
But do you accept it a little bit more when you know the referees and officials haven't got that, I say, so-called safety net to fall back on because it's not actually working as it should? But I think you do maybe accept it. You would maybe accept it a little bit more if you know there's not a second chance to get it right. Which when there is that second chance, they're not getting it right quite often.
Yeah, but it's all well and good saying that, but as I've just said, if Newcastle United play Manchester United on Saturday and Newcastle are denied 2 Stonewall penalties, we'd be sat here saying the exact opposite, saying, well, this is why they need to have a second look at it. So you can't have it both ways. I know we're sat here really disheartened at a Newcastle result last night because it went against us. But then on the other foot, I just can't get on board. And I'm sure people in the comments will be sick to death of VAR as you are, but it's not the problem for me. It's the people using it.
I just don't know what the remedy is at all. I mean, interestingly, those in the VAR room last night have reportedly been stood down from the duties, alongside the letters of apology that we see Premier League managers getting and the removal of officials from their duties. I don't really get what the point is, because an apology letter is not going to do any good. Removing these referees from their jobs tonight, that's not going to change anything.
Kieran Trippier made a very good point last night, and it's a point that a lot of people have said, and that is that Premier League referees or Champions League referees should actually walk through the mix zone after a game and have to justify these decisions to reporters. They can't just hide behind, nameless, faceless apologies to clubs. They should come out and say, this is why I give the decision, or this is why I didn't give the decision. And they have to have more accountability than they have at the minute.
I think they need to be mic'd up. And I also think that if someone is in their ear saying something about a decision, I think every single decision should go to the pitch side monitor. I think at every point, if there's something they're not sure about, send them to the pitch side monitor, because every time at this moment that you go to the pitch side monitor, more than likely the decision is getting overturned. And I think there's an expectation and there's a pressure on the on-field referee to change his decision. Whereas I think if in every instance you send them to the monitor regardless, there won't be that kind of expectation that the decision is going to get overturned.
But then how many times? I mean, the game would just be stop, start, stop, start. I don't actually like, them going to the monitor, really. I think if a decision is taken 15 or 20 attempts to look at it and decide, it's not clear and obvious. I feel like a lot of these decisions are night and day, and I think adding more stoppages in the game with the touchline monitor isn't the way to go either.
Well, if you have an idea about how to fix the mess of VAR, do get in touch and let us know. Let's talk about the football then, because Newcastle United deserve praise for their performance. First half, they were excellent. They absorbed the pressure when they had to. They pressed when they could and tactically did very well. Second half, it was much more backs against the wall, but they were organised and never really looked in too much danger. But I have seen quite a few people argue that somehow the scanless VAR decision was just because of the fact that PSG battered Newcastle in the second 45. And I just want to point out how absolute rubbish that is, because you set out to win a football match in any fair way you can. And sometimes it isn't pretty, but as long as it is effective, then that's what matters. And for 97 minutes, Aaron, it was effective. 38 clearances. So what? That's what the defence are meant to do. Nick Pope pulling off 3 or 4 great saves. That's his job. It's not always going to be entertaining or heart racing, but especially not against a team like PSG and not with the injuries they've got. But Eddie Howe had a game plan, and other than that shocking bit of refereeing, it very nearly came off for him.
Yeah, it did. I mean, look, those second half final minutes were absolutely excruciating before the penalty. It seemed like, there was 15 hours left when there was only 15 minutes, and Newcastle did have to spend the last 20-25 minutes of the game, camped in the box. PSG with, I think it was over 30 shots on goal. I think if PSG had scored in the 96th minute through Mbappe, then you could hold your hand up and say, fair enough. PSG deserved something out of the game because of the amount of possession, the amount of chance they had in the second half. it just makes it, so bittersweet that it came in the circumstances it did. But equally, I thought Newcastle United defended very well with the low block. I think when you add in the fact that Eddie Howe didn't make any changes and you had 11 players out there pretty much running on fumes at times, especially in the second half. I think Isak in the second half looked as if he's maybe still carrying something. Gordon looked a little bit leggy at times. But you look at the performances of Trippier, Lascelles, Livramento, Miggy, some really, really, Miley as well, some really, really good displays out there. But I think, let's be completely honest, if PSG had snatched a late equaliser in fair circumstances, you wouldn't really have grumbled too much.
No, you wouldn't have begrudged it at all because of the way the game panned out. But that's very different to arguing that actually the penalty was some sort of justice for the way PSG played in the second half. At the end of the day, they couldn't get the better of Newcastle United. They couldn't beat Nick Pope. They couldn't get the ball in the back of the net. They missed some absolute sitters from close range, granted, but at the end of the day, that's on them.
Mm-hmm.
And for Newcastle United, as you say, quite rightly, to lose the lead and potentially lose the path into the next round on the back of something just so baffling and frustrating and annoying, it's just unfair.
Yeah, and I think I've seen some people today say, take an issue with the fact people are saying Newcastle were robbed and pointing to the fact it was because, PSG had so many chances how they were robbed. But actually, they were, given the circumstances of the penalty.
That's the name of the game. Like, do you know
Yeah.
what? I'm sorry to mention a certain manager that people from a Newcastle persuasion probably don't like. Sam Allardyce, right? He gets so much stick, or used to anyway, back in his day, about the way he plays. It was boring. It was bang it long. It was never entertaining to watch. But for the large part, West Brom aside, Leeds aside, it was effective.
Well, I mean, that second half performance last night looked as if it was a Rafa Benitez team. Let's be completely honest. It was literally backs to the wall. We're not going to have many touches in the opposition half. It doesn't matter. We're just going to grind out the 1-0, and it's so nearly paid off. And Newcastle would have deserved huge plaudits. Let's not pretend that they defended really well and kept PSG out for the entire game. They didn't. PSG missed some really, really poor chances in that second half. But Newcastle equally made it hard for them. It would have been a very, very resolute, hard fought win with a little bit of bad luck from PSG side sprinkled in if they had lost it 1-0.
But you need that. You do right. You look at those instances.
Completely. But I think it's the manner of the way they lost it, which is why everybody's so fed up this morning.
I just think if you've come up with that plan as the best way to beat your opposition, then who cares how it looks? Who cares if you're entertained or not? At the end of the day, you want to win. You need to win. 3 points is what matters. And over a consistent basis, it's not going to be that backs to the wall approach. It's not going to be boring to watch. It's not going to be 0 shots on target in the second half. It's not going to be 64 passes in the second half. But against certain teams, you have to change the way you play. And Eddie Howe and the team deserve huge credit for adopting a different approach and adapting to what was in front of them.
Yeah, well, we saw two different Newcastles. We saw in the first half a little bit more of that Newcastle, which we thought would come. And Kieran Trippier said about an hour before kickoff that they wouldn't change their game plan, and they didn't in the first half. They attacked when they needed to attack. They had some decent chances. But then, as you say, when they needed to change it up, and we don't often see how teams spend 30, 40 minutes camped in their own half like we did last night. But the situation, meant it had to happen. You're away at PSG with only 11 men, no one really to bring off the bench. That raucous atmosphere, the attacking players that they were throwing on. I think they had about 6 strikers on the pitch at one time. So yeah, just a shame that and also a point that we haven't spoke about, and I actually haven't seen too many people talking about on social media because it's sort of got lost and everything else. Where on earth did 8 minutes come from, by the way?
Well, a lot of people have asked that question actually in the comments. I was going to ask you
because there was 4 or 5 substitutes in the second half, 30 seconds of substitute. That's a couple of minutes. Throw in a couple of VAR decisions, but there wasn't any goals to add on time for, and there wasn't any real serious injuries. There wasn't really many players, Newcastle players, going down with injuries either. Faking injuries. So I don't know where they got 8 minutes from as well.
Again, maybe on the topic of clarity and openness, do we need to start seeing just why so many minutes are being added on? Do we need to see at the end of the game the fourth official and his calculations?
Yeah, and I think we've got used to seeing in the second half of games 4 or 5 minutes. It's just a staple now, isn't it? Really. And I was expecting last night maybe 5 or 6, but I think, you know, when you get an 8 like that out of a game where there wasn't really too much of the stop-start, I mean, even the VAR checks for the other 2 penalties that weren't given were so quick, and the referee moved straight on. It's just another sort of controversial aspect of last night's game, I suppose.
It certainly is. We'll jump in to the comments. Mark says we got robbed, and if VAR doesn't work for stuff like this, then there should be a new rule after the game that the decision should be overturned and the goal disallowed. I don't think, I'm not going to agree with you on that one, no? No, Aaron says not a chance. Nathan asks, where does the 8 minutes come from? To coin a phrase, says they should have all been booked for surrounding the referee too. Their rules, not mine. Thomas says we were robbed. End of. He thinks the referee bottled it against PSG. PSG's ref had a good game until the last minute. I think me and Aaron both agree with that. Let's hear from Eddie Howe then, because he's handled this really, really well. We'll hear from him in the moments just after the game, and then we'll speak about his reaction to the VAR decision.
You know where I'm going to start. Do you feel a huge sense of injustice at the end of that penalty decision?
Yes, I do. I think it was, in my opinion, it wasn't the right decision. So many things to take into account in that moment. I think the speed first. I mean, it's a ricochet that when it's slowed down looks totally different to the live event. Ball hits his chest first, then comes up, hits his hand. But I don't think his hand's in an unnatural position. I think they're down by his side. He's running, sort of in a running motion. I feel it's a poor decision. I think it was hugely frustrating for us because in that moment you know how little time there is left in the game, but nothing we can do about it now.
We've been scratching around and talking to referees, experts back home, and they say that it's not actually in keeping with the guidance that's been issued by UEFA, so it shouldn't have been given as a penalty. Are you struggling to contain your emotions? You're normally very calm and considered after games.
Yeah, of course, but I think I have to control myself. That's my job, but it doesn't do any good to lose control of what you think and what you say. But I just feel for the players after what they've given today and how we've performed in very difficult circumstances. And what that decision does to the group, because now the destiny is not with us, and that's tough to take after being so close to being in that position.
So there we have Eddie Howe. I mean, pick out of what you will out of that, but 2 key points for me. He says I have to control myself. That's my job. And it doesn't do any good to lose control. I think really good words from him, especially when you consider how other Premier League managers may have reacted. You know, he's very respectful, he's very calm, but Mikel Arteta and Jurgen Klopp, I don't think would have been. I think they can learn a thing or two from Eddie Howe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've just been having a little talk off air in the office, haven't we, with a couple of our colleagues, and some of them are saying, oh, you know, Eddie Howe's reaction was a disgrace and he should have been, you know, kicking up the fuss. It's the only way that, you know, VAR learn and all this. But actually, I think me and you were in agreement that actually Howe's reaction was very, very good. I think it was positive. It was very measured. Even when he was speaking to BT Sport on the side of the pitch, even had Ali McCoy sort of saying, I don't know how you're staying this calm, because you know, him and Jermaine Genius were obviously calling it all sorts. Yeah, I think Klopp and Arteta could learn a thing or two from that response, because if it had been them on the other hand, I think we would have seen something very, very different.
You would have had Arteta shouting in the mic. You would have had Klopp calling for a replay. But I agree with you there, because for me, I don't want Newcastle United's manager to be embarrassing. You know, he's a calm character, and I like the fact that he's not embarrassing himself with his reaction. I'm sure inside, away from prying eyes, he's very, very angry. But I think you don't have to shout the loudest to be fighting for your side in your club, and you can be controlled and respectful and still show the players and the fans that you are angry and fighting for the club.
I mean, I don't even think it was inside and away from prying eyes. You could see he was absolutely fuming. He came out and said, I can't say what I actually feel. You know, Eddie Howe knows, you know, exactly what's gone on there. He knows it's an absolute robbery, but he also knows that he can't slag the officials off like other managers do, because he will get punished for it. And like you say, he hasn't embarrassed the club. He hasn't, sort of overshadowed it. He's just been very measured, very composed. I personally like that. I'm sure there'll be fans who, think, he maybe needs to say what he feels, but the game's gone. What good's it going to do now to rant and rave about it?
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the stand-up performers then, which there were many. Firstly, Nick Pope. Saves from Mbappe and Dembele were good, but that one from Barcola with his knee was very special. He was superb. He was quick off his line. He was communicating with his defence. That was maybe his best performance, I think, for Newcastle United.
Yeah, he's been very, very good in all the Champions League games, to be completely honest. Apart from maybe one of the Dortmund games aside, but he's that was one of his better performances. I think there's a very, very long list about who gets man of the match, but I think he probably pips it for
I
me.
think
I'd
so.
be interested to know if other people would maybe have a shout for Livramento or Miggy or Miley or a couple of the others. But I think Pope for me was man of the match. And I actually found myself chuckling away in my living room last night, because this just goes to show that, some Newcastle United fans don't really know how good they've got it. And that was that Nick Pope has a fantastic first half. He has a fantastic first hour of the game, doesn't put a foot wrong. And then all of a sudden he gets the ball passed back to him and he takes it first time when he should have took a touch, and he knocks it out to left back. And I think it goes out to play on Newcastle loser or something. Just, a little error. And I saw two Newcastle fans straight away back to back tweeting, "Oh God, Nick Pope, honestly, when is Howe going to see that Dubravka's so much better?" And I was just thinking, Nick Pope's having the game of his life in the Champions League. He's kept Mbappe out. He's making fantastic saves, and he's misplaced one pass, and he called him for Dubravka. And I just think some Newcastle fans do not know how good they've got it. Yes, Nick Pope isn't very good with his feet. We all know that. Yes, he does give us a few heart and mouth moments when he comes out of his box. But if you're looking at shot stoppers in England, he's the best.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. What he does in terms of saving efforts on goal, you can't forgive his distribution. Let's be honest, it is shocking, but hey, you will take that, and you will take the way he stops and keeps clean sheets for Newcastle United. Absolutely excellent last night. Les says Arteta's reaction was a screen for side's poor performance. Eddie, like us, was inherently proud of the team and their efforts. Peter says, I love Eddie and the way he comes across. He's so respectful to the club, the staff, and the players. Got loads of people in the comments talking about VAR. Don says VAR was brought in to get the wrong decisions right, but last night they used it to get the right decision wrong. It's breaking the game we love. VAR is not a very popular piece of technology in today's show. Billy says, I remain very positive as a Newcastle fan. I can't remember a team in black and white shirts that give so much so often, and the fans love them for it. 100% agree with that. Lewis Miley, outstanding last night again.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
We keep talking about him every single week, because every single time he plays, he just puts in another fantastic performance. Ali McCoy said he wanted to check his passport because Miley looks so calm in such a big arena. And he did, didn't he? He looked very mature, was up and down the pitch, getting his foot in, just looked calm. He looked at home.
It was a great moment last night when Ali McCoy said on commentary, I hope Lewis Miley's friends have been allowed to stay up and watch this, as if they're 7, not 17. I'm sure they were allowed to stay up till 10:30 to watch a football match. But there was actually 2 robberies last night, because there was obviously the VAR call, which we spoke about, and there was also Leclerc's player ratings, which are notoriously harsh. I mean, they absolutely slaughtered the PSG players last night. They were getting 3s and 4s, whereas Newcastle were getting 6s and 7s, which is very high for Leclerc. Nick Pope got an 8, but somehow Lewis Miley only got a 4. I mean, that is absolutely scandalous. I thought he was fantastic last night. Looked at home as he did against Chelsea, as he did against Bournemouth. I thought he was fantastic. He pocketed Mbappe once or twice, which was very good to see. And yeah, look, I mean, we're going to have to get used to it, because he's going to be in the team for the foreseeable. So, but yeah, I thought he was really, really good last night.
It's going to be interesting when Sean Longstaff comes back from injury, when Anderson eventually reappears, and then obviously when Tonali comes back next season.
And Joe
Willock. Sorry, Joe, I forgot about you there, mate. But I mean, Lewis Miley, he's not going to be a player who just drops out, is he?
Well, someone made that point last night of how long does it take us to start talking about Miley filling in, as opposed to him actually being one of the first names on the team sheet. Now, I still think he's got a way to go till that happens. I think he probably needs to show it in a couple more games in the Premier League at the highest level. But But in terms of what he's done in the short period of time when he's been thrown in, let's be honest, at the deep end, he's more than proven that he's capable at this level, which is absolutely fantastic to see at 17.
Yeah, fingers crossed. A lot more to come from him. I thought Jamal Lascelles had a good evening. It looked like Fabian Schär probably drew the short straw and had to take on Mbappe a bit more than Newcastle United's captain. But I thought Lascelles was dominating. He won the most aerial duels for Newcastle United. Another top performance from him.
Yeah, really, really good from minute one as well. No shakiness, which we see from him at times. I thought he was very, very good. He dealt with Mbappe, very well when he had to. Led the back line well, and also sort of got involved when he had to. You saw him, sort of flaring up with Mbappe. He was throwing himself into the mix to try and get PSG players away from the referee at times. A really good performance for a player who hasn't obviously got that much Champions League experience as well.
And again, we talk about the conversation about Miley when it becomes the norm to discuss him as a first-team regular. And it seems in recent weeks we've been talking about Lascelles getting up to that level. I think we're past the stage where we expect it to drop off. I think he's going to be at this regular level of performance until he's out of the team.
Well, I got pelters a couple of weeks ago from saying I didn't think Botman would walk straight back into the team
I
when
don't
he came
think he
back.
does.
And now that was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago when I was saying that, but I think now I'm probably even more confident that Jamal Lascelles, and if he does, it'll be a real shame because he shouldn't lose his place when Sven Botman comes back, which, by the way, we still don't know when that'll be, which is, very, very worrying. I mean, if he does have to have surgery, then we're probably not going to be talking about seeing Botman until February or March anyway. But yeah, of course he shouldn't drop out. He's been the standout of that defence in the last 6 weeks.
Oh, some people will come back and say Fabian Schär, I think.
No, look, I think Fabian Schär's been fantastic. He was amazing against Chelsea on Saturday, but I think we sort of knew Schär had that in his level. I think in terms of who's raised their game in the last 6 weeks, it's Jamal Lascelles, isn't it?
I think I mentioned it after the last game, but we're sitting here talking about Newcastle United being unlucky not to come away from PSG with all 3 points, not to have their own Champions League destiny in their own hands. And the very fact that they've got Fabian Schär and Jamal Lascelles as a centre-back pairing going up against the likes of Mbappe.
Yeah, I mean, you've got those two going up against Mbappe. You've got Lewis Miley running the show in midfield. You've got, Eddie Howe seemingly thinks no players on the bench to bring on and, change the game. Lewis Hall was last night the only player you thought might come on in that second half. It just goes to show, I mean, how... And I mean, we haven't spoken about this yet, but I think we should. Obviously, it's absolutely devastating about last night and we're all gutted, but the results went their way last night. Dortmund winning was huge, and I think the manner of Dortmund's win, coupled with the fact PSG are so beatable in this group, coupled with the fact that actually I think Mehrdad Guendouzi is going to get his wish about St James's Park because that atmosphere against Manchester United will be electric because fans will go there feeling aggrieved, and I think the Milan one will be even better. And I think Newcastle United will beat Milan at St James's Park, and as long as Dortmund do their job, the destiny, yes, it isn't in Newcastle's hands, but there's still more than in with a shout of going through.
And you know what's interesting is that if the Magpies don't beat Milan and their European venture does come to an end, you won't see how talking about this far decision. You won't see how putting it down to injuries. You'll see him addressing what went wrong in terms of them just not reaching the level of performance that we know they can. He's a man who just doesn't peddle excuses, and I'm all for it.
Absolutely, yeah. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, how he's never going to do the Steve Bruce thing of talking about excuses. And also, even if PSG go and beat Dortmund next week, Newcastle's destiny's in their own hands in terms of staying in Europe. Don't lose to Milan, and you're at least playing, in that Europa League knockout round.
Champions League knockout stage or Europa League?
Champions League. Come on.
I'm glad you said. No, I agree. I'm glad you said that. I think they have obviously more chance to win the Europa League, but you want to continue the Champions League.
You want to continue.
Tino Livramento just continues to impress. My dad rang us before and he said, we've got to build a team around that young lad. I don't think anyone would disagree with him. Defensively and attack, and he's got it all. And to be doing it after such a short space of time, after a horrendous injury, I mean, you're still not playing after your ACL. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, they say, what's the saying? Even a broken clock's right twice a day. And your prediction that he's going to be a starter, well, I mean, I think he said he was going to unseat Kieran Trippier, which is the jury's still out. But I tell you what, we were talking about it in the office before we came on air. Dan Baird must be looking and thinking, how on earth do I get back into this team? Because it doesn't matter whether you play a Livermore right back, left back, right midfield. He could probably do a job in centre midfield. He is now undroppable, isn't he? And he, what, 21? I think last night wasn't even a shock really, because he's done it in every single game. He's in such a good vein of form. But last night he was extra good, I thought.
Not to brag, but I think a lot of my predictions are ringing true. And I stick by my point. I'm not even going to change it. I still think there's a strong possibility that he might actually be first choice right back next season. We shall see. But yeah, tremendous from him. And we can't go on without mentioning Miguel Almiron, because his work rate was something special. And that's what he does. It doesn't always get the praise from those outside of Newcastle because he's an attacker and they'll say, oh, he should be judged on goals or assists. But his work rate, tracking back, yards covered, it's often unrivaled. He won 12 out of 16 ground duels against PSG, which just shows you how important he was at the back.
Yeah, if I'm completely honest, one of his better performances in recent months. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. That first half, he was, far and away the best player, I thought, maybe alongside Pope. Really, really good, and that's just what he offers, and that is why he stayed in Eddie Howe's setup for so long when others would have got rid of him or upgraded him. We can talk about, whether he produces enough going forward, but he more than makes up for it with what he does defensively. And I thought last night, when they really needed it, backs against the wall, can you imagine that second half performance with someone like Alan St-Maximin in the team? It wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have been as compact and as tight. And he deserves huge praise for what he did last night. I thought he was, I think some people would say he's up there for man of the match. I think Pope, Livramento and Miggy were the three last night that were really, really just a class above, I thought.
And a great shot on goal as well, which obviously then was spilled out to.
Which was a howler, by the way.
It was.
Donnarumma.
But let's praise Lewis Miley in that instance, because the run around Hernandez to distract him for Miggy to get the shot off was superb. And again, 17 years of age and just having that footballing brain to just do that, open the space up, tremendous from him. But yeah, Miggy putting in the defensive work, which is brilliant to see. Now, you mentioned the subs and how he didn't use any Eddie Howe. We know the injuries would have played a factor in that, but I thought the final 10, especially Alexander Isak, looked like he couldn't trap a bag of cement. He was that tired. He couldn't control the ball. He wasn't effective. So why didn't Eddie Howe make a change? Why didn't he bring Lewis Hall on and maybe move Gordon up front? Or why didn't he even just bring Michael Ndwini on? Because to be brutal, Isak, he wasn't there in the final 10 minutes. So why not bring on someone with a bit of legs? Even a young lad like Ndwini, okay, he hasn't got the goal scoring nous of Isak at this moment in time, but he'll have the energy, and he, to agree, would be more effective in the role that Isak had to play in them final 10 minutes.
I'm sort of with Eddie on this one, and I'm sort of glad he didn't bring a sub on, because they all knew their jobs in that last 20 minutes, even though they were getting run ragged, and PSG really should have probably on another day went and won the game. I think if you're throwing a youngster into that and they're having to, work out who they're marking, and it's taking them 5-10 minutes to get up to speed with the game.
It was Alexander Isak. Isak was kind of like halfway, just about a bit
but
beyond.
They didn't really need Isak to do it.
Well, that's my point, though. But would it then not just be beneficial to just throw in someone with a bit of energy into the mix?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't think it would have made too much of a difference personally, but I get the point. But I think it just goes to show that Eddie Howe clearly didn't trust any of the bench, given how young they all are.
We're going to see just how fit they are, aren't we, on Saturday?
We are, yeah.
And because hard work in France, and Man United coming right around the corner. So where does that leave Newcastle United then? As Aaron said, they've still got a chance to get through the knockout stages. If they beat Milan and Dortmund beat PSG, they'll go through. If PSG win and United beat Milan, it's the Europa League for Newcastle United. So it is very much in their hands. Aaron, are we guilty of maybe focusing too much on VAR, and we just need to try and focus on the positives, i.e. great performance in Paris, great performances by the majority, if not everybody, who played last night?
No, if I'm completely honest, I think we're well within our right to talk about VAR as much as we have, and it is you can't get away from the fact it is the main talking point of last night's game. I just hope that we aren't doing what Arsenal are doing in 3 weeks' time, where applauding a decision that goes against PSG. We need to be more dignified than that. But I think we can talk about both sides. The positives were there. Newcastle really took the game in the first half. They defended resolutely second half, but you can't get away from the fact that the the main talking point from last night's game was that scandalous decision.
Yeah, I'll just quickly read some comments out before we wrap up. To coin a phrase says, we may regret that decision not to make any subs in the game against Manchester United and beyond to run the players into the ground. Remember Bournemouth, they say. John says, if we go in the Europa League, I reckon we'll be one of the favourites. We seem to be going along quite nicely at the moment, and we've got about 11 out injured. How will we do when they come back? And I'll finish Aaron on this one and get your thoughts on it. So Hane on Facebook says, according to me, their opinion is that Howe needs to refresh the squad this January. Howe should look at the contracts of most of our senior players, especially those who will expire after this season, and thinks they should be sold. It can leave more space for the team to lower more players. Some of the players like Matt Target, they already know there's no longer any space for him in the squad. Wow. So this chap wants a full overhaul in January.
Yeah, I don't really agree with that. I don't think I need to say too much on it.
John adds, it might be handy for us that Man United play in Turkey this evening. I think we've got the edge at home anyway. Chaps, this has been Everything is Black and White podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be back with John Gibson on Thursday morning and the view from the opposition on Friday. In the meantime, head over to chroniclelive.co.uk. For myself and Aaron, we'll see you guys